My name's Harty. The main plant medicine I use is psilocybin. I've also done LSD, small amounts of DMT. That might be it. Yeah. I was 18 the first time I tried psilocybin, and it was brewed in a tea. And I didn't have a full-on psychedelic experience, but it definitely an altered state. It was at a rainbow gathering. I was 18, I had just left home, and I was traveling by freight trains and had just been taken under the wing by this benevolent, kind of crust punk traveler kid, and he had told me about this rainbow gathering. And I was raised in a conservative family, and I had always been kind of looking for a different way of existing in the world, and heard about this group of people who were periodically meeting outside of the realms of how we conceive of society. They had no money exchange. Everything was trade. All food was donated by farmers. They didn't have laws. Ended up at this gathering and had my first psychedelic experience, and it was wild, and I ended up engaged at the end of it. I had like a lifelong interest in psychedelics because my mother had spent the 70s following the Grateful Dead around and selling LSD, but she had a really spiritual connection to it. She and her partner would fast for 24 hours before taking it, and it was always this very sacred thing. Although they were selling it, they're distributing it. I was raised to have this kind of like interest in its more spiritual applications, because that's how my mother had experienced it and how she had used it in the world. And I was raised on stories of her experiences with LSD, along with like, don't ever do this drug, but here's like all the magical things that happened for me when I did it. So I did in middle school, we had a project where we had to choose some illicit substance to write about, and I chose LSD. And I went on the Arrowwood websites, which for those of us, who grew up in like the beginning of the internet, Arrowwood might still exist, but it was a website that talked about all the drugs. And so I looked at how it was, how LSD was made, and all these like kind of fractal graphics that were put up of what it was supposedly, the effects that it had. But still, it wasn't, besides my mother telling me that it was a spiritual experience to have psychedelics, that wasn't really presented to me till much later. I don't even remember where the transition happened. I started working with just mushrooms in general. I started doing a lot of foraging around the Pacific Northwest. This was about 7-8 years ago. I had a partner who was a mushroom expert, and so we just spent a lot of times with mushrooms. And then through the experience of being around mushrooms more and actually seeing where they were growing and seeing the environments they were in, and coming to understand that mushrooms in nature break down dead matter. And so being told that this was a medicine, and not just a medicine, but one that was connected to my own ancestry, right? Europeans used psychedelics, they used mushrooms. This has been a part of our evolution for as long as recorded history goes. The Dionysian cults, like there's all of these different connections that we have to, we've co-evolved with these plants. And I think it was just reading the different literature and then seeing Paul Stamets speak about utilizing psilocybin in a specifically intentional medicinal way. And then understanding, after my first experience, like real experience, I'd say first intentional experience of this as medicine, this isn't just a party drug, and realizing that it was doing exactly that. It was going into my spirit, it was going into the places where there was dead matter, and it was breaking things up. And that's where I think the idea of like a bad trip comes from. I think that often psilocybin especially can bring up the things that we're not ready to let die, we're not ready to let decay, we're not ready to acknowledge yet. And I think that's where, for myself, when I've been brought into more difficult spaces, psilocybin encourages and requires us to come into a space of releasing what's dead, of acknowledging what's dead, and allowing like the kind of mycelial network, right? So the mycelia, it comes in and it proliferates. The fruiting bodies of the mushrooms are reliant on the breakdown of dead matter. And we can look at the neural web and the mycelial web. There's a reason why those things look the same. And there's a reason why the mycelial web, the neural webs of the brain, and the universe from an outside perspective all have the same pattern. The first time that I very intentionally used psilocybin, I had the experience of really, going into the most difficult aspects of my psyche that had not been fully acknowledged. Things that, you kind of go through life being, someone like myself who works in healing, and you convince yourself like, oh, I've done like all of this work, and I think that psilocybin and other psychedelics can kind of show you where your blind spots are and the things that you haven't yet acknowledged. And through the act of bringing you down into the depths, bringing you into those spaces, at least that's what it's always done for me, and that could just be who I am and my, lack of fear of the shadow and the dark. I think the psilocybin's like, okay, like we'll bring you there, and it doesn't mean that it's not scary. It doesn't mean that, even though I pride myself on being pretty brave, it does force you to face your deepest fears. Again, which I think is where the idea of the bad trip comes from. Sometimes we're not ready to. But for myself, I think that the biggest thing that helped me to really start utilizing psilocybin as a medicinal substance was having the guidance of being told while in the state, that fear was the greatest thing, the greatest obstacle kind of for life in general and for our thriving and for our proliferation and our ability to live in alignment with our highest truth. That fear was really the container. And so for me, the medicine of psilocybin has been continuously bringing me into the things, into the fear-based, obstacles that prevent me from self-actualization. I have a very specific ritual that I do. First, I really make sure to clean my house, top to bottom, completely. Just because of kind of that idea, which I really resonate with. This is something that Freud and Jung used to say, that the home is kind of a reflection of the mind. And so when we dream about the home, the things that are happening inside the house are a reflection of the mind and the body and the state of like everything that we're holding, everything that's kind of in our home, the home itself. So I clean my house from top to bottom. And I heard Paul Stamets talk years ago about the hero's journey, which he described as being taking 5 grams of psilocybin with total sensory deprivation, So, meaning that I wear a blackout eye mask and noise canceling headphones. And the reason for that is very specific, and I think really changes the whole experience. In my experience of taking psychedelics in the company of other people, it's really easy to project yourself and project onto everything around you. And so when you do the sensory deprivation, you have nowhere to go but inwards. And if your intention is to go deep into a healing journey, that is the best thing you can do. And of course, that can be like very intimidating, very scary to just be with nothing but yourself. But it's really benefited me to do this. And so I will, get really, really cozy, all of my warmest clothing. And I always prepare too. I always put things aside so that I can come outside and walk around the property. Because at some point when I'm coming out of the journey, in order to reintegrate, I need to come back to nature and put my feet on the earth. And that's just a really important part of the medicine for me. As I do believe that psilocybin reconnects us to our earth consciousness and our nature consciousness. So that's a really important part of it for me. So I get, really, really cozy. I get all bundled up. I have all of my things. I have my water nearby. I have my, the things that I use for grounding. If I start to feel like I need something to bring me back into this realm, a physical object, a talisman, a stone, something, something that belonged to a grandmother, just anything that, I feel like can bring me back into, if I start to feel like I'm going too far away and I'm starting to, something to, a tether, some kind of little tethering talisman. And I curl up and I, go in and, the 5 grams is a lot. Depending on the strain, but it's never been an issue. I've never felt like it's been too much. But the first time that I did it, I really was adamant about as I felt myself going into the space, it was really important for me to continually tell myself, you are going on a journey. Like you are an observer in this experience. Like at any moment you can come back into this plane, into this realm if you feel like you're getting too afraid or going too far, you're on a journey. And that was a really helpful mantra for me the first time that I had that experience. It's something that I try to do ideally every 2 months. I don't, for myself, that much of a journey, because 5 grams is a lot and you can really go into different spaces. And the first time I did it, I really did have to reteach myself how to be back in a physical body. It highlighted some of the things that I hadn't been, the first and foremost, childhood wound came up. And the person that I had held so much resentment for 30 plus years, I started to actually see reality from their perspective and start to have compassion for the reasons why they were the way that they were and why they caused the harm that they did in their lives. And it was this incredible experience of shedding their pain, which helped me shed mine. And that was kind of that was the major healing component of that experience. But this was also, I did this experience at the end of 2019. And it told me that something major was coming. And it told me that I was brought into a space where I was shown this realm of fear, this whole realm of fear. And it was like this, the undergrowth, if you could imagine like a swamp, like a spiritual swamp, just full of bacteria and entities and kind of this, this darkness. And it kept trying to pull me in, and I was afraid of getting pulled in. You're like, what is that? I'm afraid. But then I tell myself, I'm on a journey. I'm just an observer. I'm here as an observer. Let's not be afraid. We know that fear is the mind killer, so they say. So let's go in. Every time I intentionally use psilocybin, for healing. It'll bring up, one by one, those things that are in the subconscious, those things that are what Carolyn Mace would call the energy hemorrhages. Whatever it is in our lives, in my life, that is a victim narrative, a way that I feel like I've been wronged, or something I have guilt about, and something that I'm not consciously acknowledging, even if it's a part of my story. It's just a part of the story and not something that's actually being really addressed. It might just be used as part of a victim narrative, or used as like a source of guilt and shame. Like the psilocybin will always find it, and it'll always like bring me into it, like, look at this. And not just look at this, but like allow yourself to like feel whatever it is this uncomfortable feeling is that you're avoiding. Because that's the thing about being human, is like, we don't heal unless we are taken out of our comfort zone. And I think that's the biggest medicine for psilocybin, and that's something that our ancestors knew. And this is why, we know that there were regular rituals of interacting with these substances to, one, connect us to kind of that oneness consciousness, connect us back to nature. It's the biggest, what I've been told is the biggest reason why drugs like ayahuasca became so widely used and shared by the people of, the jungles of Peru and the other parts of the world where that vine grows wild. Like, the reason why they were, wanting white people to come down, people from the West to come down and use this drug, was like, people need to reconnect to the planet. Like, we need that medicine. We need that, that reminder of our lack of separation from, that reminder that we are nature, that we're not, separate entities from it. And that's what plant medicines do, kind of across the board, the naturally occurring ones, at least. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. They bring me into a place where I can acknowledge, address, and heal from, and really enter into uncomfortable spaces that I need to in order to heal. And they remind me of why I'm here, why I'm in this incarnation. Every time there's, access to guides, to ancestors, to all kinds of things. And messages come through that are true, that are premonitions of things to come, that end up being mantras that help me through difficult times. And always, I'm always brought into a space of death and rebirth. That almost always happens. There's an experience of like complete surrender and allowance that happens, which, for myself, that's the best medicine, is kind of relinquishing control. Again, if fear is, as I'm continuously told by what I believe to be higher beings when I'm under this, under the influence of psilocybin, I'm always told that fear is the barrier, that fear is the thing that is, that naturally occurs inside of us, but is also like very consciously used against us to keep us in states of control, to keep us, the people of Europe take to the streets to demand, better living conditions, but us Americans are, in such states of fear that we're prevented from doing so, whether or not that's created intentionally or not, who's to say. But psilocybin, LSD, other psychedelics, they really force that surrender, and that surrender helps us overcome fear. And for myself, again, that experience of one by one going through each member of my nuclear family and experiencing these profound healing shifts in those spaces. Because, you often can't have the conversations that you feel like you need to with people that are in your life that, you have whatever history with. And so, in my experience, psilocybin has allowed me to enter into, maybe conversations with my own subconscious that feels like a conversation with them, or, again, that kind of opening and expanding and coming into places of compassion. Um, yeah, entering into healing spaces that I don't think would be possible without psilocybin. Because it's going to show you where your blind spots are and the things that you're avoiding. And again, like the way that mushrooms break down dead matter, it's going to help transform what's dead inside of us. Because otherwise they just stagnate and they rot and they don't do anything. But they can also be like such a source of creativity. Psilocybin goes in, it finds those things that are dead, it spreads its little mycelial networks of light, and then it fruits, it creates out of that deadness. It's like the transformative dragon energy.